Cute.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to everyone as well. Um, everyone for everything. Um, I'm covering for our good rabbi this morning. I want to take us on a journey regarding the shamir worm. This is a favorite little Talmud journey, and I started us off with They Might Be Giants' song Dr. Worm, which you'll see. Which also featured the fabulous Rabbi Vole on the solo. Okay, so uh, has anyone heard of the Shamir before?
Yay.
Awesome. What do you know, Noreen?
Not a lot, other than that it had this, was supposed to be able to crack mountains and do all sorts of things. Other than that, I really don't know very much more about it, but I had heard about it. Other than Shamir, the herb.
What's the herb?
The herb Shamir in English is fennel.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, keep that in mind. We'll maybe get back to why that might be important.
Mhm.
Um, uh,
Olivia, can
yeah,
I ask you at some point, I have no idea how to deal with links that are in the chat and I lose them when we're done. Can you email them to the email list?
yep.
Thank you.
Yes. And if you would like to save the chat, in the chat section,
Mhm.
in the of that little chat box, the upper right
Yeah.
corner, there's 3 dots
Mhm.
next to the smiley face, and that'll give you an option to save chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. So, meet the Shamir. The Shamir is a tiny worm-like being whose gaze had the power to, as Noreen said, crack mountains. The Shamir engraved the names of the tribes in the gemstones on the priestly breastplate, and even more famously, King Solomon used the Shamir's power to shape the stones for the temple. In this millennia spanning tour of the Shamir, we're going to go through the Talmud's supernatural landscape. In each section, I have here some questions and that I think the text invites us to consider. And there's also an art gallery on this Google Doc, and the full text of Ruth Zakatinsky's The Wonder Worm, which was out of print and hard to get. So if you're interested in that, it's included here. And if you know anything about her, I'd love to know more. Okay, I'll start us off in Pirkei Avot. Would anybody like to read for us this text here on the origin of Shamir and demons?
Okay. I don't mind.
Great. This part here.
Okay. 10 things were created on the eve of the first Shabbat at twilight, literally between the suns. And they are these: 1, the mouth of the earth that swallowed Korach and his rebellion. 2, the mouth of well that followed Miriam in the desert. 3, the mouth of Balaam's talking donkey. 4, the rainbow. 5, the manna. 6, the staff of Moses. 7, the shamir. 8, the letters. 9, the writing. And 10, the tablets. And some say also the demons, mazikin, the grave of Moses and the ram of Abraham, our father. And some say also tongues, made with tongues. Question: what is it? Okay. No,
What?
shall I go on?
Oh, sure. So
Yeah.
I offer some questions for us
Yeah.
to consider. What is it about this twilight time, right before the first Shabbat, that God creates these figures in this time? Yeah, Elisheva.
I have always thought of them because they're things that are not part of the natural law. They're things that work differently and somehow they're not part of regular creation. You don't want these things popping up all the time. So they have a special time to create special things. That's how I've
Mm,
always thought of it anyway. I don't know.
I love that. Any
I
other
mean, you don't
thoughts?
want holes opening in the earth just here and there for who knows what reason. You needed it once for a specific reason.
For those of us in Pittsburgh, the reality is that they just open up all the time. So.
Well, we have had a whole bunch of sinkholes here this
Yeah.
past year. They're calling 2022 the year of the sinkhole in Israel.
Oh,
But
golly.
nonetheless, it actually proves my point. We don't want that happening.
Rabbi Judy.
Okay, I'm unmuting. So my first thought, this is a very interesting and weird list, because my first thought was you need a God particularly, not only when you're in a foxhole, but during those liminal may not be the right word, times and experiences. In other words, between childhood and adolescence, at birth, at death, at weddings, because your situation at evenings when night comes, in the mornings when the light comes. So the first few are to me like that. But then what I think is interesting is letters and writing and the tablets. So what I think of man-made progress, I mean, we are the people of the book, but the Akkadians actually invented the alphabet, and they preceded us. But so it switches from these phenomenons, as was said, to letters and writing and the tablets. I'm repeating myself, but I would be curious of what you have to say about that, compared to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the Shamir we're discussing. That's something we have to understand. And then the writings and the tablets, letters, writing, tablets. Can you give us some insight, Olivia?
Some say that the letters and the writing are specifically the letters and writing on the tablets themselves, which, like the first set of tablets that God makes, or perhaps the writing implement that is used in the tablets. But I think that narrows the idea of the magic and mystery of language itself. I think the rabbis are elevating these things to the level of miracles, that it's a miracle that communication exists, and that we're able to have like these symbols on a page that somehow we read and know the word means writing. And that perhaps there's a life and a magic in each of these.
I think that was brilliant, Olivia. And versus speech, because animals have speech. It may not be speech like we have it, but then being able to write, and of course the tablets, that was maybe I'm too, that really resonates with me, that in a way it is a miracle.
So we have in this time these two that I'm going to hold, that we're going to see again and again throughout this journey, which is the Shmir and demons, Mazikin. Note that the Shemir makes it in the list proper, and the demon sort of makes it on the, hey, what about them? But they're both made by God in this idea, that like they're not accidents of the universe, they're purposefully brought in by God for some purpose. And we'll think about these purposes as we go. Noreen, and then we're going to head on to our second text.
We often talk about twilight as being the mystical time. So it seems very appropriate that these things were supposedly created at twilight, as it being a mystical time and a time between when nobody really knows what's happening. And then my question is, what's this thing about tongues?
I think that, to say briefly, they were sort of stymied by how you could make metal tongs without metal tongs to grab the metal tongs with.
Oh, okay.
Um, the idea, of course, is that you just use wooden tongs, and the tongs in Talmud they argue about this Mishnah
Yeah.
line.
Okay.
But certainly we could imagine that God could have done these things at any time, but that by doing it at this liminal between two defined moments, liminal, like a threshold, there was something special in that twilight. Okay, the first Shamir text I want to bring us to is Sota 48b, which is Gemara on the Mishnah chapter Sota 9, which discusses a number of supernatural subjects or just wonderful things in the world that have become batel. I'm not sure I'm conjugating it right in these sentences, but that root, bet, tet, lamed, meaning to be nullified or hollowed, ceased, interrupted, voided, abolished, suspended. All of these are possibilities in this word. That these fabulous things have suffered in various points in Jewish history. They also mourn a lot of things that have gotten worse. The Shamir, which we haven't even really started to meet yet, I want to give you where its end point is, which is that it's said to have been batel since the destruction of the temple. And I'm not sure which temple that refers to. And that's going to bring us to some specifics about what's going on with the Shamir. So I figure I'll start us here in Sota. As I said, from the time when the first temple is what Steinsaltz says here, but there's no reason to really believe that, was destroyed, the Shamir ceased to exist, is how he translates it. But I think that there's a lot more space in the word batel than he's giving in ceased to exist. And then it says, as we've read, the Shamir is the creature which Solomon built the temple. Why did Solomon need a worm to build the temple? Well, Solomon had read the Torah and had read the whole Tanakh, apparently, which included his whole story. And he read in 1 Kings 6:7, from the house, when it was built of whole stones from the quarry. And also that there was no sound of iron tools in the building, because iron tools are weapons of war. And so he needed the Shamir for this. Okay. I'm going to bring us here. And who would like to read for us this section here from Rabbi Nehemiah? Yeah, Richard.
Yes, I can read it. Okay, the Gemara poses a question, and according to Rabbi Nehemiah, who maintains that they used iron tools even in the cutting of the stones for the temple. For what purpose did the Shamir come? The Gemara answers, it was necessary for that which is taught in a Baraita. These stones in the breastplate and ephod, upon which were inscribed the names of the tribes, they may not be written on with ink, because it is stated, like the engravings of a signet in Exodus, which means the names must be engraved onto the stones, and they may not be scratched on with a scalpel, Ismael, because it is stated in their full settings from Exodus, indicating that the stones must be complete and not missing any of their mass.
Quite the achievement, if possible. Would you like to read us how it worked in this next part here?
Yeah. The Baraita continues. Rather, one writes the letters on them in ink and shows them. That is, he places the Shamir close to the ink markings from outside without having it touch the stones, and they split open along the lines of the ink of their own accord. Like this fig that splits in the summer without losing anything of its mass, and like this field in the valley that cracks in the rainy season without losing anything of its mass. The Shamir was used in this way for these engravings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want us to think about that image for a little bit. That they that they had these stones that they were putting together, one for each tribe, beautiful gemstones. I don't really know how they got them in the desert. And they were forming them, and rather than chiseling them and losing any of the precious gemstone, they write on them, put the shamir in front of it, and it like splits. I love that image of the fig, because the fig is this like wonderfully sweet, nutritious fruit. And we can think about this gemstone and perhaps what nutrition we get from that. It's juicy. It's just really juicy that they use this fig. Yeah, Rabbi Judy.
Sorry. Oh, God. All right. So what I'm picturing is like a piece of paper that you can see through, and it has the letters on it. And somehow, instead of etching, using that as a template and etching into the stone, just the fact that it's near the gemstone creates the word. Is that correct?
I think that's a good read. I think they're trying to say that they have written the letters on the stones.
Okay, but without actually doing it. In other words, it's a miracle. That's a miracle also. The manna is a miracle, and this is a miracle. And that they compare it to the fig is beautiful, because that's a natural part of nature. Fruits ripen and they burst in some way, but it's not that. It's a natural process.
Yes, I think they want to share that even though it's a miracle, it's in the natural world. That miracles are a part of the natural world. That they're not so distinct from each other. I think that's there. And that they don't want the shamir to be something that's totally, how does it work? But rather they want to know it works this way, especially if it ever becomes unbatel and, would be needed again. There's one more section here, which tells us about the size of the shamir. It's that of a barley corn. That's really small. It's very, very small. And it was created in the 6 days of creation, is what it says here, which is true of our previous text, but I think highlights that it wasn't made on the day when the animals were made. And nothing hard can withstand it. In what did they keep it? So that it won't break everything in the vicinity, because if everything it's in front of like splits open, that's going to be a mess. They wrap it in tufts of wool and place it in a leaden vessel full of barley bran, which is soft and will not be broken by the shamir. And I hope it's cozy in there. I hope it's cozy. What else do we put in lead?
Nuclear materials?
Yeah, nuclear materials. I just,
The Roman plumbing system was all lead.
a plumbing system. There's
Romans,
There used to be.
Romans used lead for pipe.
and of course we know lead paint not safe. There's a fabulous book called, this is the book that got me into Talmud, which is Rabbi Natan Slifkin's Sacred Monsters. And he brings forth a theory that the shamir is, in fact, radioactive material and not a little critter at all, based on this text of why would you store it in lead. And also this idea that perhaps this is like lead paint and they expose it to this radioactive material, and everything that isn't protected by the lead paint breaks in that way. I think it's a fun idea, and hold it as well in your understanding of the shamir. Okay, I brought us this text first because it shows us where the shamir went, so we can kind of have that the end while we start at the beginning. How it works, what its like power set is, and its size, where it was stored. All of this is here. I want to bring us to a little bit of artwork before we get into the big text that I think we won't quite finish up today. Okay, so this is the oldest depiction of the shamir that I could find, and if you can find older, I want to see it because I want to include it. This is Eberhard Werner Happel in Relations of Curiosity. Oder Denkwürdigkeiten der Welt. A worm gobbles stone. Notice here that this shamir is eating the stone rather than like breaking it with its gaze. I like these little teeth. Can you see these little
Mhm.
teeth?
And so many eyes.
Yeah, a whole bunch of eyes here. I think that's fabulous. We can get a little closer. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm offering these to you so that you can see how people have imagined the shamir, so that you can work on your own imagination of this critter as we go. From 1917, Beatrice Hirschfeld's illustrations in Jewish fairy stories by Gerald Friedlander. This is the shamir here.
Oh,
This
cool.
tiny little friend. Notice that they say here that the shamir disappeared. No one knows where it's to be found, which is an interesting translation of Batel, or just understanding. I first encountered this illustration through a Twitter page, Adne Sadeh, who is the Jewish monster hunter on Twitter, and says, "Hey, Jewish artists, how come there are no badass drawings of the shamir worm? I mean, it's a worm, I get it, but maybe somebody could do better than this." Which, for there not being much, thank you, Beatrice Hirschfeld, for giving us anything. But the next one is probably my favorite depiction. So this is by the artist Ezra Rose, whose handle is Shade Garden, a shade, a kind of demon, who is an illustrator, zinester, Jewish monster and magic maker, and queer and trans-friendly farmer. And this is their shamir. Still keeping with these eyes here, with the many eyes that we saw in the Happel. It has this sort of purple galaxy body that embodies that twilight time in which it was formed. And about it, Ezra writes, "The shamir worm, used by King Solomon to cut the stones for the first temple, as no tools ever used in bloodshed, could build a monument to peace. My favorite Jewish monster, a symbol of creative rather than deadly destruction." I think this line is one of the big points that I like about the whole Shamir narrative, is this figure of creative rather than deadly destruction. Renee, I think I saw your hand first.
Is there any significance to the 3 sets of hands? And the
What do
fact
you
that
see?
one set is, what do I see? Well, in looking at them, one looks like it's either pushing away or giving some kind of stability. And I'm trying to decide the difference between the other two, but something to the effect of holding it together.
Oh, I love all of that. I love I love the stability. I think it's that priestly blessing hand too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you can see it. Yeah. And also it reminds me of the work of our hands.
Mhm.
the phrase of, the work of our hands, which is always a part of Jewish artistry, a part of tapestry, a part of any kind of fiber work.
Fabulous. I love that interpretation. Rabbi Judy, and then Elisheva.
Oh, I'm not muted. Oh, that's not good. All right. So this is like a more sophisticated version of the first thing that you showed us, at least to my mind's eye. And the first thing from 1706 or whenever that was, that artist, it's scary. This is a scary thing. If I was a little kid, I would be scared. This could be like a scary monster in a children's book. Whereas the one that looks like two blocks of ice or whatever, that's like a friendly little creature. So anyway, that's just my emotional reaction. I don't know. You guys probably think I'm being ridiculous. I didn't even notice the hands till Renee said about the hands. So anyway.
Fabulous. I love you have I think any emotional reaction to these art pieces is a good emotional reaction to them. I think before, almost universally, I've shown these two to people, and they've gushed. They're like, that's the most adorable thing I've ever seen, with these little teethy teeth. And I love that you're like, no, that's terrifying. I would never want to meet that. I really appreciate that. Elisheva.
It's the eyes more than the teeth that are really scary. No, the later one with the hands, I kept looking at it and saying, that looks very familiar. It looks like the illustration in Alice in Wonderland of the caterpillar who gives her all kinds of useful information. It's a giver of knowledge, beneficial knowledge. And I don't know whether he intended that relationship, but that's really what it keeps reminding me of.
Ezra is they them, but yes, I love that connection to the caterpillar, who also brings a lot of like cryptic what's
Yeah.
going on. Awesome. Okay, let's hold these.
The other,
Yeah.
Olivia, 1 second. The other one, there's a disconnect with the first set, because we were told that the worm does not destroy any part of the stone. The worm does not take away from the stone. It stays in its form. It basically cracks. And here the worm is eating away at whatever it is. And so I don't see that as a good description of what we've been told to start with.
This is a nice question. And I think an important thing to notice about the transformation of legend, where 1300 years after the previous text, the idea, the cultural knowledge of this figure and how it operates has shifted for this person, or they didn't know the idea of the shamir not like losing any piece, and depicted it this way. Perhaps this is how they had heard it. They didn't know that Talmud text, or maybe they didn't even care, and they knew about a bug that was able to destroy stone, and may have said, "Oh, this bug that we've just encountered in science is Solomon's ancient shamir." I don't really know the full context of this, and it requires further study. I'd like to bring us to, oh yeah.
Wait, which leads me to believe that in the third illustration, that possibly the hands up are a sign of keeping the bug away from whatever the bug is working on, And then the hands holding together, not touching it, but whatever he does happens without destroying the piece he's working on.
Oh, fabulous. Yes. The way this creates like distance, but not alienation. Distance, but not alienation. Oh, fabulous. Okay. I'm going to bring us to where we're going to be for the majority of our time, which is Gittin 68. This, we get here, how? The Mishnah involves, so the tractate Gittin is about the get, the Jewish divorce document. This is particularly a Mishnah that discusses whether a get is valid from somebody who has a particular kind of delirium or mental confusion. And then they say that that name for mental confusion, Kordiakos, is the name of a demon that causes that mental state. And then once they're on the topic of demons, they're on the topic of demons, and they want to keep on talking about them. So they quote this line from Ecclesiastes 2:8, which I always find myself, after I encountered this, very disappointed in the JPS translation, which will translate this as coffers, which I think is so boring. So Ecclesiastes is written by, quote unquote, King Solomon, okay? And he says, I got myself shadarim and shadarot and ta'anugot b'nei ha'adam, human pleasures, like oneg, shida, and shidot. They break it down. Sharim, visharot, musical instruments. That makes sense. A shir, a song, a poem, musical instruments. Ta'agunot b'nei ha'adam, pools and bathhouses. I'm down. And here's where they start debating. They say, Sheda v'shedot. Here in Babylonia, they interpreted it as male and female demons. And in the West, Eretz Yisrael, they said carriages. And if you open up JPS, as I said, you'll find coffers. But if you look, the word is shida v'shidot, which they say is sheda v'shedatin. Oh, look, it's trying to tell me it's a strong box, which legitimately, like, it could be, but it's much more fabulous to imagine demons. Rabbi Yochanan gives us this cryptic phrase, and then I'm going to pass it on to you all to read, for somebody to read us this next part. Rabbi Yochanan said, there were 300 types of demons in a place called Shechin, but I don't know what the nature or form of a demon really is. So perhaps we'll learn. Who would like to read for us this first part here? 7.
I'll read it.
I'll
Thanks.
read. Oh, Renee, you're gonna
Oh.
read.
Yeah, Renee, go for it.
Go,
Okay.
Renee.
The master said, here they interpreted it, male demons and female demons. The Gemara asks, why was it necessary for Solomon, the author of Ecclesiastes, to have male demons and female demons? The Gemara answers, as it is written with regard to the building of the temple, for the house when it was being built was built of stone made ready at the quarry, and there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was being built. Solomon said to the sages, how shall I make it so that the stone will be precisely cut without using iron? They said to him, there is a creature called a shamir that can cut the stones which Moses brought and used to cut the stones of the ephod.
That's that breastplate that we just learned.
That's interesting.
What's interesting, Renee? Tell us.
that you go from male demons and female demons to the shamir. Do we know the gender of the shamir, or there is no gender of the shamir?
Fabulous question. It doesn't quite come up. I think it's conjugated masculinely, but that doesn't tell me specifically. What other questions do we have about this? I have a big one, which is where does Solomon get Rabbanan? Where does King Solomon get rabbis? Rabbis just didn't exist in King Solomon's time. Yes.
It's like the Torah, time is circular. You know, Abraham knew about kashrut long before we got kashrut. So they say. So time is circular.
Rabbi Judy.
What I find fascinating about this is the cultural aspect. So in Jerusalem, in the Yerushalmi, they taught, what did you say, carriages? But in Bavli, it was demons. So, and then when you go back to the beginning, there was a word that's translated starting with a K that sounded like, yes, that sounds like Greek, doesn't it?
It is Greek, yes.
Yeah. So in other words, what we have done throughout our history as a living, breathing religion is we have incorporated the cultures where we've lived. For instance, the Seder is imitating a Roman feast. That's why you lean over, because free people would eat lying down and they would be served, or, not sitting, but kind of leaning over. And the chuppah is Greek, that the Greeks did use. That's where the chuppah comes from. And I could cite a lot more if I could remember them. If I had another cup of coffee, I would remember more. But we have done that throughout. I mean, now we have unveilings of stones after someone dies. That's not Jewish. That's Protestant. Well, it's Jewish now. So again, it's weird that in Jerusalem they call them carriages, or what you had another translation, Olivia.
Oh,
and
JPS coffers.
Coffins.
Sorry, coffers.
Coffers. Okay, so places where you place money and jewels and stuff like that. So doesn't that speak to where these sages were living at the time that they interpreted?
Yeah, I think this whole story, one of the themes is a sort of meta response to the magical landscape that the rabbis are in Babylonia. Never mentioned in Talmud, but very present in the archaeological record, are something called incantation bowls, which are, I'll give you a incantation bowls here are these bowls that have a demon bound inside with magical writing around them to bind the demon that you would bury outside the front of your house to keep the demon away. These are, they came in many shapes and sizes, and in fact, sometimes had fake language, like pseudo-Hebrew, which was written by presumably somebody who was illiterate to be sold to somebody who was illiterate, and yet we might think that the magic still worked because the intention was there. Or perhaps it didn't, and they should have sought out a better scribe.
Or perhaps it was fake language because it was a mysterious message that we weren't supposed to be able to read.
Ooh, I love that too. The rabbi in Talmud, they never bring up incantation bowls as far as I've seen. And I think And
I
I've
think-
read that they specifically didn't want to give them credence, which I think they were trying to hold on to their power and establish their power. And we'll think about how that works here. In a world where there's many demons in Babylonia and many people who know how to control those demons. And also in their own history, King Solomon, who was known as somebody who had male and female demons in his service. And as Rabbi Judy was bringing us, that they also were influenced by the Greeks, by the Romans, all of their customs and cultures as well. And needed to say, we have the knowledge, we have the power, follow and listen to us. Noreen, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, two things. First of all, we have today woodworms who cut into wood, but apparently in 2019, there was a shipworm found that has the ability to cut into rock. And they started doing investigations to say maybe this was the shamir, but there doesn't seem to have been any follow-up on it. I just read about it just now, but there doesn't seem to have been any real follow-up about it. So I don't know what happened. Maybe the powers that be decided it wasn't a good idea to pursue it.
Okay, so where are we in the story? King Solomon read the Tanakh and said, oh, I'm supposed to do this without any tools of iron? How shall I do that, rabbis? And the rabbis said, well, don't you know about the shamir that Moses used? And he says, where is it found? And the rabbis say to him, bring a male and a female demon and torment them, which is not nice, I'll tell you. Torment them together, you know? Ugh, awful. It's possible they know. The rabbis aren't even sure. And they will reveal it to you, this place where the shamir is. So Solomon brings a male and female demon together and torments them. And they say, we do not know. We don't know where it is. Perhaps Ashmedai, the king of the demons, knows. Okay. So who would like to read here? At 9.
I'll read.
Yes, thank you.
Solomon said to them, where is Ashmedai? They said to him, he's on such and such a mountain. He has dug a pit for himself there and filled it with water and covered it with a rock and sealed it with his seal. And every day he ascends to heaven and studies in the heavenly study hall. I love that image. And he descends to the earth and studies in the earthly study hall. And he comes and checks his seal to ensure that nobody has entered his pit. And then he uncovers it and drinks from the water in the pit. And then he covers it, seals it again, and goes.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, tell us wow.
Keeps busy.
At the beginning where it says he dug a pit for himself and then filled it with water, and I assumed he was inside, that this was his safety place. But in fact, he's off traveling, going to various places to study. And the whole image of a demon studying is such a contradiction.
Yes.
It's not what we usually think about as a demon who wouldn't go and study in the heavenly study hall.
Yeah, it looks as if this pit was just dug to be filled with water, which had to be kept pure for him when he came and wanted to drink.
Yeah,
He
in the
puts
end,
the
that's
water
what
in the
turns
pit and
out.
he covers it and seals it. So, I mean, it sounds as if it wasn't a pit for a person, but it was like a well filled with water.
Yeah, in the end, that's what it
Yeah.
sounds, but the
Yeah.
beginning sounds like he's making himself a safe home.
Yeah, he lives perhaps on this mountain. He's got his own personal private water. he studies all day. Like, note that what he's not doing all day is like going out and wreaking havoc on humans.
Right, exactly. He's not behaving like a demon.
So you know what this sounds like? I'm not into sci-fi at all. That's not the genre I like, but it sounds like this is like a precursor. I don't know, are Jews big on creating sci-fi and that kind of genre? I don't know.
Some of the best writers were Jewish.
But, well, because this could be a movie. I don't know.
I think this whole thing is very cinematic as we go along, and I think it would make a fabulous one.
Right.
Note also that what's the source of this information that we've gotten? Tortured demons. So who's to say quite like the efficacy of what they're telling us? Maybe they're speaking very well of their king. Maybe they want to lure Solomon into a trap by making out Ashmedai to be not so bad, kind of harmless. So they can get revenge on having been tortured by Solomon for information they didn't even have. Just a possibility. Okay, who's up next with Benyahu?
I can read if no one else.
Yeah, go for it.
Solomon sent for Benyahu, son of Yehoiada, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, sorry, a member of the royal entourage, and gave him a chain onto which a sacred name of God was carved, and a ring onto which a sacred name of God was carved, and fleeces of wool and wineskins of wine. What did Benyahu do? He went and dug a pit lower down the mountain, below the pit dug by Ashmedai, drained the water and plugged it with the fleeces of wool so that Ashmedai's pit was emptied. And he dug a pit higher up the mountain above Ashmedai's pit, and he poured the wine into it so that the wine filled Ashmedai's pit, and he plugged the lower and upper pits that he dug. He climbed up and sat in a tree.
Who's the demon now? You know?
Yeah.
Messing with his water source. Also note the recurrence of wool, which was in the Shamir's tube. Okay. What happens with Ashmedai once this happens? Well, when Ashmedai came and checked his seal, remember he had sealed his pit so he could see if anyone tampered with it. It wasn't messed up with. And he opens his pit, but it's filled with wine. And he quotes Proverbs, because of course he goes to the study hall all day. And he says, wine is a mocker, strong drink is riotous, and whoever wallows in it is not wise. And then also says from Hosea, harlotry, wine, and new wine take away the heart. And he says, I will not drink it. Wow, amazing. Such restraint. But eventually he became thirsty. And what are you going to do? You got a whole vat of wine, you know? And he was unable to resist. And he drank. And he became intoxicated and he fell asleep. Getting people drunk so they fall asleep is a classic biblical trope. We know this from the story of Yael and Sisera in Judges 4. And then also in our Hanukkah story, Judith and Holofernes.
But
And he didn't just take a sip of wine. He guzzled a lot to fall asleep right away.
Right, but the story that I love is it Yael, where she gives him warm milk.
Yeah.
To get him to sleep. So it's different methods. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. One of them is milk.
One of them is warm milk.
Yael is milk.
Love. You know what they say, if you can't sleep, you should have some warm milk.
there's a line that is in some of the girsas, some of the writings, some of the versions of the Talmud that isn't here, which is another quote that he says to justify him drinking, where he quotes Psalms 104 and says, "Wine gladdens the heart of man. I will drink," which is left out of here. But he's very knowledgeable in Torah, so maybe the demons were right that he goes and studies in the study hall in heaven and on earth every day. Okay. Who's up here with this text about Beniyahu descending? Mark, yeah.
Okay. Benayahu descended from the tree, came and threw the chain around Ashmedai and enclosed him within it. When Ashmedai awoke, he struggled to remove the chain. Benayahu said to him, "The name of your master is upon you. The name of your master is upon you. Do not tear the chain. God's name is written on this chain, and it is forbidden to destroy it." I just want to make a comment that I remember when I was at I went to a Hebrew day school in Toronto, Associate Hebrew Schools, and I remember in the library we had books, Legends of King David, Legends of Solomon, and this is, these are the stories that I read about Ashmedai and King Solomon.
What has stuck with you the most?
Ashmedai.
Yeah, what about him?
I don't know. He was sort of like a genie in a way. He does all kinds of things for Solomon, and I found it very interesting.
In the like the Muslim traditions, their shadim, their demons are jinn, genie, right? And Suleiman was known to own, in that tradition also as well, many demons, many jinn. I'm glad that you had these stories as a kid. I did not, and have fallen in love with them in the past decade. I think this is interesting that it's not that Ashmedai couldn't destroy this chain, but that he's not allowed to because God's name is on it. I also like that, our demons are subservient to God still, because as we learned in our first text, God made the demons. Do you want to take us through the next paragraph too?
Okay. When Benayahu took Ashmedai and came to Jerusalem, he reached a palm tree, and Ashmedai rubbed against it and knocked it down. He reached the house and knocked it down. He reached a small shack, kuva, belonging to a certain widow. The widow emerged.
Yeah, so now we're getting sort of their journey back. We talked. It definitely is very cinematic. Now we're on the journey back, and Ashmedai is going to do various curious things that we'll get answers for probably next week. But finish up this part here, and then we'll see where we are.
And she begged him not to knock down the house. He bent his body away from her to the other side and broke one of his bones. He said, "This is as it is written, soft speech can break a bone." Proverbs 25:15.
Yeah, is this demon behavior?
Wow.
Yeah,
No.
he's a rabbinical demon.
He's a rabbinical demon. Yes. Okay, so King Solomon, right, had read the Tanakh and knew that he was not supposed to use tools, but didn't know what to do about it, right? Meanwhile, Ashmedai, the king of the demons, is like quoting scripture every time he talks. He's like a rabbi. Noreen, I saw you come off mute. Were you?
Sorry? No?
I no. Okay. Yeah, he's really knowledgeable. If we were at this point to say, like, what are the what like vibes are you getting from the rabbis about what they like and don't like about Solomon and Ashmedai? What would you say?
You know, we see all our heroes with clay feet and don't see them as perfect. But Solomon gets lots of praise for lots of things. And it's certainly, you don't want to paint Solomon as somebody who shamefully seeks the help of demons. So if he does, the demon must be a good guy. So he finds, and it also, I'm beginning to wonder, what is the real meaning of the word demon? Maybe they aren't all this very singular image that we think of them as. Maybe they are just as varied as humans in what kind of demons they are. And this one's a rabbinic one, as you say. But I think it also protects Solomon's reputation.
I was just writing that down because I want to keep those thoughts as I think about it through the week. Yeah. Like you don't want to totally diss on Solomon. Perhaps the
Right.
rabbis want to say, "Hey, we don't need kings anymore. You got rabbis now," and so they want to say they're at least on the level of Solomon. That Solomon would at least come to them for help. And if Solomon's coming to rabbis for help, and they want to say they're good, you're right. You don't want the king going to seek evil support, hapless maybe, but yeah. Yes, and I agree that demons as varied as humans, and that's a really nice thing to draw from here. Yeah, Alicia.
I just looked up the etymology of demon. It comes from Greek daimon, which means deity or genius. And only into Latin did it become an evil spirit. So maybe demons weren't always evil. We get that from the Romans, but maybe not. This was Greek times after all.
Yeah. I think that's a very nice thing to note about this word demon, which is so commonly used to translate. I'm scrolling back up to show you a nice feature that we have here in Safaria.
And we actually talk about somebody being a demon with the cricket ball or the football or something.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about them being bad. We're just talking about them being extremely gifted, I guess the word is.
Yeah. Magical power, if
Yeah.
anything.
I'm not finding. So Safaria has this
Okay.
wonderful thing where you can highlight a word and it'll give you dictionary entries.
All right, wait, I have a question. Is it clear that at this point, when our sages wrote that demon was considered an evil spirit? Because I'm assuming that from my vantage point, that's what they're talking about. But is that in fact, at that point, it was, because they said about torturing them.
I
could
mean, lots of good people. get tortured.
Olivia, and so at that point, they were considered like evil in a way, or more than in a way, like we consider demons?
This is a very good question. And it's something that I want us to consider what this story says on that question. We had here, right, Rabbi Yochanan says there were 300 types of demons, right? In just this one place he was at. But he doesn't really know what they are. He doesn't really know what their nature is. And that perhaps this story can reveal to us some of that nature of demons. Etymologically, shade, I think, is very difficult. Like shadim, very difficult word to say what's really going on there. Mazikin, the one that we encountered in Pirkei Avot, is much easier. It's like from that shares with nezek to damage. But even just because it causes damage doesn't necessarily make it evil, I would like to say. animals all damage each other, right? In the giant food chain, right? We damage things too. And that doesn't necessarily make us evil, but it is part of the nature.
And
Shading,
water both lets you grow your crops and floods you out,
precisely.
or both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah. So they're certainly wary of demons. Demons certainly can do harm, and perhaps God made them to be forces of harm. We get on the subject because of a demon that causes a mental disorder. But then this story comes, and the very king of the demons, right? A king, perhaps supposed to be seen as the epitome of the people, is somebody who is very studious and is on board with the rabbinic project of knowing Torah and helping widows. Mark.
Although the Oxford English Dictionary defines demon as an evil spirit or devil, it does tell us that the root of the word is the Greek daemon, meaning deity.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what Elisheva was getting at too. Even that geniusness, I think, is very interesting.
Yeah, this source says both deity and genius.
So I'm gonna place this link in the chat for you again to my Shamir packet. There's we're gonna be continuing where we left off in this Gittin text next week. But if you want to, dive into some more, I have a whole bunch of further reading from various sources, including here's the Sacred Monsters texts about possibly a snail that could have been a Shamir option. The idea that it was radioactive material instead of a worm. And some of this is a little less relevant yet, but also the Wonder Worm, if you want a children's book. That's all I've got for today, so that we're at about 10:22. But we'll pick up with that journey of Ashmedai back to Jerusalem, and we'll get to the Shamir and Solomon's temple. Thank you so much.
Olivia,
Great. Thank you so much, Olivia.
Olivia,
was
thank you very
great.
much.
It was great.
Olivia, oops.